Supremacy Games. Chapter 126 to 135. Chapter 126, Treating Traps Like Air. After ending the limit test, Felix planned on staying put for a minute until the aching goes away. He would rather waste a minute than walk forward, stepping on those lines and words that could be a trap keys waiting for a prey to step on. Asna didn't give him directions as she was waiting until he reactivates his infrared vision. It sounded quite weird that passive abilities could be activated as well. However, there was a quite big difference between active abilities and passives on the way they activate. As active abilities require only elemental energy for to work, simple as that. Meanwhile, passives were split into two types. 1. Passives that provide an instant buff to the host without needing anything in return. Such as Felix's poison immunity and super strength. 2. Passives that need mental energy or brain power to handle their continuous activation load, like infrared vision, night vision, cloud surfing ext. Those passives shown only on stronger bloodliners who reached higher stages of replacement. As their mental strength got stronger to the point it could handle the continuous activation of those passives without repercussions, turning them into the first type of passives. Unfortunately, Felix was still far from that stage. He could keep his infrared vision on for 1 hour or 2 at best. And that's only if he focused on nearby areas. If he decided to push its potential to the limit, his head would start aching again. Alright, show the way. It's time to hunt. Felix inspected the ground ahead of him in black and white, not seeing any other color but the two. He turned his head to the left and noticed an array of shimmering red rifles pointing at a spot a few meters ahead of him. He looked to his right side as well and found nothing to worry about. Although Felix could only see the hidden traps, but not the mechanism needed to activate them, he was not worried at all. The ability to see danger beforehand was enough for him to not get touched by a single trap. Traps were deadly only because they were hidden, but if they were exposed like this, at least 90% of their power gets taken away. Asna did not dilly-dally as she told him enthusiastically to head right first then left and keep going straight ahead until he meets 3 paths cross. Immediately after getting a clear direction, Felix bolted forward while keeping close attention to the trap at his right, preparing at any given moment to dodge. Phew! 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 As expected, the trap activated the moment he stepped on a beautiful image of a flower, lighting it up as well as the rifles pointing at him. With a bit of difficulty, Felix narrowly dodged the bullets by rolling forward 3 times until he got outside of the danger area. Though he saw them beforehand, dodging bullets wasn't an evade that any average Joe could pull off. His fans and Madame Zoe, who was low-key paying attention to him while commentating on other players, were left in disbelief at his inhuman reflexes. His fans were just arguing with each other if Felix would activate the trap or not, and if he did would he be able to survive it unscathed. Yet, they didn't think that his reflexes were honed to such a degree that allowed him to pass through the danger zone unharmed. They bought omnipotent vision that allowed them to see all the traps and hidden compartments so they wouldn't miss any player downfall by traps. Based on what they saw so far, at least 15 players got heavily wounded or died by those traps. Not a single one of them managed to leave in one piece like Felix. Before long, their shock turned into amazement and finally to numbness as they continued to watch Felix evade trap by trap while sprinting towards the 3-path cross that Asna mentioned. Not a single one managed to touch Felix's clothes, from bullets, arrows, spears to elemental attacks such as fire snakes and lightning bolts. What's even funnier was the smirking yellow emoji on Felix's dark hoodie that kept that expression no matter how many dangers Felix went through to reach his destination. The spectators and Zoe felt like they were being looked down upon by that emoji over their lack of understanding of how Felix managed to pull that off. Do you think he was using X-ray vision passive to spot traps beforehand? Well, either that or he had future predicting ability. I would rather believe that he could see the future than accept that he had that kind of busted reflexes. You guys are just hating. Why didn't you say anything when other hardcore players dodged those traps as well? Are you really comparing the way they dodged with landlords? Some of them almost f***ing died doing so, while landlord passed through them with his hands in his pockets. Open your dog eyes and look at the replay on the screen. Why is the MC not showing it? The spectator froze as he noticed that another player was being displayed on the large screen, and not Felix's highlight that was worth the exposure. He pointed his finger at the screen and yelled, "What the hell? Why are you showing us a player getting devoured by a beast? F***ck, we want to see landlord outplay." Incensed and enraged, the other spectators near him booed as well with their thumbs down at Zoe's incompetence to not notice such a fine play. They assumed so, but the truth was that Zoe already saw what Felix did, but still refused to highlight it. She was truly holding a grudge at his earlier disregard. Too bad, she didn't think that the booing would get louder and louder, as news spread quickly between the spectators that they missed an amazing play, but the MC refused to show it to them. Boo-hoo! The spectators kept booing, using either gadgets or their hands on their mouths. The majority did so just because the rest were doing it. They didn't even care to see Felix's play. As long as they were following the herd, they were okay with anything. However, those sheep were the ones who brought the biggest trouble to Zoe. She knew that Felix's club would not love the way she was treating him, but she didn't expect others who had their own clubs to join in the fun. After seeing that things were going off the rail, she quickly highlighted Felix's previous play to appease them. She didn't want to fight against the wishes of the crowd for simply a tantrum she was throwing. Otherwise, she could forget about obtaining the promotion she was anticipating after this game. Please excuse me, my dears, for not noticing landlord's highlight. She pouted cutely while bowing slightly as an apology, showing her cleavage on the screen. The enraged spectators gradually contained their voices like a spell was cast on them. How could they not after seeing such a ravishing beauty acting this way to appease them? The female spectators all had jealous expressions clouding their faces after seeing the skillful way Zoe tamed those men. But they understood that the only reason why the men were so easily controllable by her was because she was using her real face and assets unlike them. In the SG, every female MC was required to be a stunning beauty in real life to be able to join the job interview. However, because of this term, the skill requirements were lowered in comparison to male MCs. This was the main reason why high-ranked players were constantly trying to woo her. It was already hard enough to find a real beauty that did not modify her face in the UVR, don't even mention Zoe, who had a glorious career plus the looks. Sigh, I should stop messing around in this game. I can't ruin my ticket to promotion over that bastard. After making her decision, she started commentating on Felix's previous highlight animatedly, not caring any more about her grudge. However, that's the only thing she did. As the moment she finished, she quickly replaced Felix's highlight with Mastermania 1's, like she was shooing away a curse. But the spectators didn't complain much about it, since Mastermania was about to fight a three-headed alligator-like beast made out of cracked clay skin and dripping mud from its mouths. Can Mastermania overcome Rare Tier 2 Soil Wraith to obtain the blue chest behind it? Zoe shouted. The audience held their breaths in excitement as they watched Mastermania confronting the beast. Mastermania kept pondering on ways to defeat the monstrosity that was glaring at him fiercely. He already spent 3 minutes now evading its attacks and analyzing its strengths and weaknesses. So far, he gained a clear understanding that this beast was one of the immortal types that could not be killed nor physically harmed. However, they had a massive weakness, and that was their core that held their soul. As long as he destroys it, the beast would crumble on itself. Mastermania knew so as well, but he couldn't do much about it, as the core kept coursing through the body of the beast, stopping only when it was about to attack. I need to time my counter-attack perfectly with its attack to be able to kill it. He spoke out loud with narrowed eyes, even though he was the only one with the beast. But the spectators were already used to this, as the majority of idols used this method to speak with their fans akin to protagonists in movies. The fans were actually the ones who proposed this idea to their idols way before, and since the idols were slaves to their fans' wishes, they agreed numbly. They went through much worse requests than this before. However, it turned out that the idols who spoke out loud their attacks or couple of dramatic sentences were the ones who toppled up the popularity idol polls. From that moment on, every idol was forced to speak everything he planned to do as dramatically as possible. Just like Master Mania now, who kept taunting the beast out loud while pointing a finger at it. Roar! Finally not able to handle the prick's taunts, Soil Wraith dashed towards him while covering itself with a solid brown skin made of clay. Just as it wanted to open its jaw and spew mud as it did before, Master Mania smacked his palm at the metallic floor while calling out loud, "Shadows spikes!" Immediately after, an array of pointy sharp dark spikes sprung up from the beast's shadow, penetrating its clay skin from underneath and behind. Before the beast could even wail, Master Mania slapped his other palm and yelled the same attack again. He knew that the moment he stopped his pressure, the beast would begin his rejuvenation. So, he must keep attacking until a spike luckily lands on the core. Crack! Fortunately for him, that didn't take long. After the third activation, the beast's clay skin shattered completely after the core was taken care of. The body of the beast disintegrated into light particles, leaving behind a number, hovering in the air. 300 GP. Master Mania gave a close-lipped smile at the fat reward he obtained. Although he consumed quite a few points of energy while doing so, it was worth it in his opinion. After all, 400 GP was still waiting for him inside the blue chest that was guarded before by the beast. This would bring the total amount to a whopping 700 GP from one battle. No wonder Felix had to turn this game into a farming competition and not exit-seeking. Master Mania approached the blue chest while massaging his red palms inside his pockets, not daring to show this action to his fans, who were cheering for him with their arms raised and flushed cheeks after his victory. He had to slap his palm on the ground on each activation to appear cool based on his fans' request. If he could choose, he would have simply snapped his fingers like a normal human being. Alas, slaves had no wishes. F***ing hell, those fans are going to be the death of me. Depressed, he thought while opening the chest as slow as possible for extra effects. Chapter 127, Battling the Iron Shark Titan. As always, Master Mania's epic Tier 2 Phantom Cat bloodline never fails to deliver. Who can resist its elusive abilities? Zoe was clearly more animated in her commentary than before. She kept using gestures and controlling the tone of her voice professionally, switching from passionate to impassive. Soon after getting done with Master Mania, she took a sneak peek at Felix's situation without focusing the camera on him. The hell? Did he kill the rare rank beast ahead of him already? She couldn't believe her eyes, so she double-checked the replay, watching him bully the beast with his poison inducements. It wasn't even a fair fight, as Felix simply activated his paralyze aura and dashed towards the beast, bringing it into his domain. Although the beast's poison resistance was exceedingly tougher than what Felix had to deal with before. Still, the inducement didn't disappoint, as it took only a few extra whiffs before it did the deed. Felix didn't have the habit of playing with his food, so he finished the paralyzed beast by using a finger to pierce its skull. He cleaned his finger with a handkerchief and went to the next prey he marked. Zoe tightened her lips at this sight. She knew that Felix was an opponent not to be messed with, not even by the hardcore players. If they kept that mentality that he was still in the purification realm, they would truly have a tough time dealing with him. Whatever, even though I hate this bastard, I got to admit, him being the underdog in the wager will make the game more entertaining. Zoe rubbed her eyebrows, not knowing whether to focus the camera on Felix or not. She understood that unless Felix made an amazing play like before, the spectators wouldn't boo her again besides Felix's fan club of course. But what could they do? It's not like Felix was the only player in the game who was playing well. Rather, there were at least 30 or more players, making out plays and highlights each second within the maze. Too bad, there was only one screen for the live audience to focus on. This meant, if Felix didn't pull something off that would shock everyone, Zoe could literally not show his face throughout the entire game. As for killing rare ranked beasts, at least 7 of the hardcore players within the bet did so as well by now. Felix only made the kill appear cleaner and smoother than them, nothing more. Zoe was on the verge of pulling her hair out at this matter. Should she give up on her grudge entirely and focus on him or not? Arg. F***ck it. I will give him one chance to prove whether he deserves full coverage or not. She stopped thinking about it and just did it, putting Felix on the large screen, replacing Mastermania, who was still talking out loud alone like a retard, while touching here and there for traps. Surprised, the majority of the spectators raised an eyebrow after seeing Landlord on the screen again. They assumed that it was a replay of a highlight he did, which forced Zoe to play it. But soon, they realized that this was the real deal. They were watching Felix's current state live. Felix's club cheered and drummed deafeningly after their idol finally made an appearance. Although they were all watching Felix by using their enhancement vision, the feeling was not the same as having him on the large screen, being focused on by tens of millions of spectators, empire-wide. They truly believed that Landlord provoked Zoe quite a bit by his antics during the interview segment. Zoe not showing his highlight further enhanced their belief. So they thought that Landlord wasn't going to have good exposure in this game. Who knew that Zoe would let bygones be bygones, and surprise them like this? Sorry for calling you B***tch before Madam Zoe. Tisk, that's nothing, I cursed her mother to the grave. Both of you guys are a disappointment to this club. The orange-bearded #1 fan, clutched both of their necks with narrowed eyes and said, if you didn't curse her 8 ancestral, you are nothing but fake fans. Give them a break, Big Orange, you are scaring the newbies. The founder of the club latched into his thick forearm and tried to free those poor dudes. I apologize, Leader Emma. Big Orange released them instantly after feeling his club leader's chest pressed on his arm. He grinned widely as he enjoyed the feeling. Bastard, I knew that something was wrong when he ditched Hyokamai club for this one. Big Orange little sister, gritted her teeth as she glared at his foolish grin. It was clear that her perv brother's only reason for joining Felix's club was for the beautiful mature leader. As for those actions of berating the newbies, they were merely a ruse to make him steal a few quick touches here and there. For Felix to have his proclaimed #1 fan, to be a perv who only cheered for him due to Leader Emma, was truly an injustice to his primogenitor bloodline. Be quiet, guys. Landlord is about to confront an epic rank beast. The boy with glasses, who wrote Felix's biography on the website, shushed them so he could focus on the upcoming battle. He didn't know if Landlord was going to use any new inducements or abilities, but his squinted eyes were enough to show that he took everything that Felix did or about to, very seriously. Leader Emma and Big O sat down in their seats. The only difference between them was that Emma gave orders to all the spread club members around the stadium to prepare themselves, while Big O wore his cheering gadget with precise movement like he was preparing for an upcoming war. However, no matter what task those fans had, one thing remained constant in all of them, and that was their torch-like eyes, as they watched Felix turn left and face a humongous beast that had an iron metallic skin, spiky long tail, 5 sharp claws in each of his 6 limbs, and finally, his shark-wide mouth, exposing a set of fierce razor teeth. How will Landlord handle the Iron Shark Titan with his inducement? The beast has total immunity to poisons. Zoe's eyes shone in delight as she yelled. Meanwhile, in the maze, Felix took a defensive stance in front of the Iron Titan. He knew that this battle was going to be an intense one. He already lost 70% of his strength before the battle even began, as metal elemental beasts were the true counter to poison elementalists. After all, how could a battle be fought, when metal beasts treat poison the same as air? Not to mention their hard solid metallic skins, which were known for taking a beating without an issue. This would lower Felix's strength even further. However, Felix didn't appear worried to the spectators and Zoe, who believed that this battle would be the worst matchup for him. The battle might be intense, but it wasn't doomed in his eyes. Confident, Felix smirked and cracked his knuckles while sizing up the humongous beast with his shimmering red slits. Might as well give my fans something to brag about. He leaned forward with hands in his large-sized hoodie pockets, and dashed swiftly towards the beast, deciding to go on offense. Whoosh! What welcomed Felix's reckless dash was a sharp claw, coming from above, trying to slice him into 5 portions. Felix didn't even lift his head to glance at it. He simply hurled himself to the left wall, uncaring about the massive pressure above him. Boom! The claw smashed into the ground, sending a shock wave around the area. Yet, the ground wasn't even scratched by those deadly claws. Meanwhile, Felix's feet latched into the wall, defying gravity. Without wasting a split second, he bent his knees and threw himself towards the extended metallic limb. Poison immunity. He smirked as he created 2 brownish bombs in both of his hands, still mid-air. The spectators and the beast had no idea about them as Felix's hands were still in his pockets. However, they soon found out after Felix threw them swiftly towards the beast's eyes, right before he hugged its scaled metallic elbow. Poof poof! The bombs somehow affected the beast, as its eyes became red, with a hint of brownish rust on its eyelids. Before Zoe could even commentate about what had just happened, Felix gave an enigmatic smile and called softly, "Oxidation aura." Without warning, a brownish mist emerged from all of his body pores until it engulfed him and the beast within. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _479614628822357225 for visiting. Awoo! A delayed pitiful cry echoed between the maze walls. The Iron Titan, who everyone assumed had a terrifying defense and immunity to poison, was threshing around, as its humongous body began showing clear marks of brownish rust, especially on its joints. Felix gripped its elbow tightly, so he wouldn't be thrown away. He knew that this was the perfect opportunity to eliminate the beast without losing a considerable amount of energy. If the Titan escaped, he would be wary of Felix, not daring to enter the poisonous aura's diameter anymore. Felix understood that his bombs were quite inefficient in this battle, as the beast's humongous size counters them effectively. To actually finish the job using only poison bombs, his energy consumption would take a toll on his tank. Thus, his only option was to stick to the beast akin to chewing gum, unmoving even if he was being smacked around. Ha ha ha, Felix, are you enjoying your time? Asna held her stomach as she laughed at Felix's pathetic sight. How could she not, when Felix was being smashed from one wall to another until he began to get dizzy? However, the frenzied Titan actions soon began to get clunky, as each time it tried to move its limbs, the joints made creaking noises. Felix sighed in relief after he heard those sounds. He raised his head and noticed that the elbow he was glued to was showing signs of decay. He smirked and suddenly punched the rustiest area. Bam! His punch easily shattered the metallic bone into small pieces, raising a cloud of rusty dust in the process. He coughed, but he didn't stop his barrage. He kept shattering bone after bone, until the Titan's elbow was snapped into half, leaving its arm dangling by a strand of metallic skin. Felix didn't wait to see the result of his strikes, as he climbed the humongous body, heading towards the head. Yet, the Titan didn't sit still and wait for him to reach. It was already in agony after its limb got ripped apart. It knew based on instinct that it would be doomed if Felix brought a higher potency of that poison, closer to its head. So it aimed its long spiky tail at that bug on its body, planning to pierce it. However, Felix swiftly dodged those attempts, as he expected that the beast was going to make a few last attempts before he checkmates it. Whoosh! Whoosh! The tail kept missing its target each time, as Felix was too elusive to be hit. He jumped from one body part to another like a monkey on a tree, uncaring about his image in each jump. Jump, monkey! Jump! Asna was having the best time of her life as she kept laughing at his silly appearance. But Felix ignored her jeers entirely. He was already performing better than expected in his eyes. This melee fighting style was totally a new field for him. In his previous life, he always kept his distance from his enemies and used his ranged elemental abilities. However, now he was getting dirty and close with a beast 20 times his size. A notion he never thought was possible before. So, no matter how much that hater laughed at his unsightly dodging techniques, he didn't take it to heart. Before long, the beast's speedy tail gradually slowed down, as the rust began to eat its joint as well. Earlier, it was the healthiest part of the Titan, as it was outside of Felix's oxidation aura, but after those constant piercing attempts, it was exposed to it continuously. Felix was waiting for only this to happen, so he could begin his real offense. All right, no need to waste more energy on it. Felix withdrew his aura, leaving him exposed to the spectators and Zoe, who were watching everything that happened inside the brownish mist with gobsmacked expressions. The knowledgeable VIP viewers were shocked about the fact that Felix was able to use 6 inducements, surpassing the known limit of having only 5, while the regular spectators were dumbfounded about the inducement effect itself. Oxidation poison. You must be pulling my leg with such a sick joke. They thought to themselves. Chapter 128, The game is forcing me to brag. The fact he was using 6 inducements wasn't as shocking as seeing with their own eyes. A poison elementalist uses oxidation reaction as an inducement. They knew that rust wasn't actually that poisonous to humans if absorbed in small quantities. So why was it being used to poison? This question was eating the VIP viewers' minds, not letting them focus on the rest of the battle. What they may not know was that Felix's primogenitor bloodline allowed him to use poisons that affected every being and race in the universe. Not just the human race. This meant Felix could use some inducements that were totally beneficial to humans, meanwhile deadly as an acid to other races. The Iron Titan's current situation just further proved so, as it kept lying on the ground, having difficulty standing up after its limbs joints turned rusty. However, not standing up was one thing, and not defending its vital points was another. Felix tried to take advantage of its weakness to target its head and get it over it, however, the bastard was too tenacious to let him focus on it. Its 6 limbs were constantly harassing him whenever he climbed over its head. So he could only cripple those limbs first before he gives him a deadly blow. After minutes of constant bashing each limb individually, Felix finally delivered the last 2 punches on the beast's brain. Bam! Bam! Exhausted, Felix wiped his sweaty forehead while jumping from the corpse. He cracked his neck 2 times in irritation over the massive effort he had to put for this beast to die. He truly struggled against it no matter how easy it looked to the spectators. After all, it was an epic tier 2 beast and metal one nonetheless. Even with his oxidation aura, he had to strike a joint at least tens of times to rip it apart as the one before. If it was another elemental beast, with Felix's super strength, it wouldn't be a problem to pierce its skull with a finger. However, the defenses of Iron Titan were no joke. He doubted that any player in this game could have killed it, except Princess Bird. Her bloodline was enough to kill it as well with few struggles here and there. He dusted himself and pulled his sleeves up his elbow like before. He smiled as he saw the total points that he earned from the rare beast he killed earlier and this one. 1000 GP. Not bad, 700 GP for an epic rank beast. I wonder how many GP legendary beast would give. He scratched his chin as he advanced towards the shimmering large purple chest. Smash! He kicked it open, not bothering to take his hands out of his pockets. His barbaric way sent a wave of curses and pitiful cries over the stadium. They were expecting him to open it gently, creating a dramatic moment for them to appreciate. But now, only spits were showering him for ruining it. But still, they held their breaths, focusing on the content of the chest. They wondered how many points he would be rewarded. Phew! A firework streaked from the chest, heading upward speedily under everyone's eyes. Before they questioned what the hell was that all about, it exploded, creating the shape of a number and a name. The players who were busy either fighting beasts, opening chests, exploring hidden compartments, or just running randomly in the maze, stopped what they were doing and lifted their heads, eyeing the colorful number and the name next to it. Landlord has obtained 1,500 from an epic chest, number, _480287105273633310 for visiting. The bastards' only reason for being this careless was their absolute confidence in their strength, which was honestly quite understandable. After all, they were a three-man alliance at the first minutes of the game. No one was that lucky to meet two same-minded players who were looking for a partnership and not a fight. Should we take the left one? I think I heard a roar coming from there. A good-looking teenager, wearing a white headband said while examining the three paths before them. You deaf? It was clearly coming from the path on our right. Enough, lazy rat. We have no time for another round of bickering. You are about to bleed my ears with your squeals. The same tough-looking man, who was carrying two axes on his shoulders during the game hall, smashed the butt of the axe on the floor, hoping to avoid another argument. Unfortunately, his attempt backfired, as Lazy Rat snapped at him while pointing a thin bony finger in his direction. Mind your own business, Battalion. You are not my boss to order me around. The teenager scrambled forward and held Battalion, trying to pull him away from Lazy Rat. He knew from the small time they spent together that Battalion had the shortest fuse of them all. Just ignore him, Battalion, he is clearly just looking for a fight. *CK this shit. It's not worth it anymore to partner up with this rat. Battalion shrugged the teenager's grasp and suggested while walking towards the straight path, let's split up here. I am done with this partnership. Baby Oil, come with me if you want. Vexed at the nickname he received, the teenager frowned his eyebrows. However, he still decided to chase after him. He had no plans to stay with that troublemaker. Well, screw you both. I don't need your help. Lazy Rat pointed two middle fingers in their direction and trod inside the path on his right. His name might have a rat in his name, but he had his own pride and principles. Too bad, he should have acted like a rat and followed after them, as a serpent was gazing at him while licking its lips. How should I play with you? Felix didn't think they would split just as he reached them. Honestly, he preferred if they were still together to not waste his time. But, it is what it is, he could only start with the lazy rat first, and chase after the other two. Chapter 129, Fiendish Smash. Felix created one acid bomb in his pocket and left it there. The distance between him and his prey was quite wide for him to just throw his bomb and hope for the best. It was better to use this ambush opportunity to close up the gap first. That was exactly what he did, as he leaned forward with bent knees and sprinted at his top speed. Lazy Rat's sensitive ears twitched the moment Felix's foot landed on the ground. Startled, he turned around and got instantly horrified after seeing Felix approaching him in such an aggressive manner. His senses kept tingling that this was a lost fight. Rat limbs. Scared shitless, he activated a morphing ability, transferring his legs and arms into rat-like limbs. He landed on all four and immediately bolted ahead. However, before he reached his peak sprinting speed, an acid bomb whizzed by his head, almost touching his ears. Explode. Poof. Felix didn't care that his bomb missed its target, as he still could explode it manually. This, in turn, caused the bomb to leave a cloud of greenish mist exactly in front of the desperate lazy rat. *CK me. He tried to slow his speed down to avoid it, alas, it was a futile attempt. He could only brace himself and enter the cloud of mist while holding his breath. He was not a retard to not understand that poison should not be absorbed. The only reason he was worried about the cloud of mist was the fact it could be one of Felix's body-affecting inducements. It was clear that Lazy Rat did his homework on Felix's bloodline in the game hall. Sadly, having knowledge of his abilities was one thing, and defending against them was another. Arg! After bolting through the greenish mist, he couldn't help but yelp in pain at his flesh getting eaten by the inducement. However, since he wasn't paralyzed, but actually running, he wasn't affected that badly by it, as only a few particles stayed on his body while the rest was left behind. Elated at getting out of it in one piece, Lazy Rat turned his head and sneered at Felix. Too bad, his sneer froze instantly after seeing that Felix was merely 8 meters behind him, and still closing in rapidly. Ha, thank you for slowing down. It turned out that Felix's true aim by throwing that bomb was merely to stop the rat acceleration. He understood clearly that even with his topmost speed, catching up to Lazy Rat was wishful thinking. After all, 2 legs could never outrun 4 legs. However, now that he was in peak sprinting speed, while the rat was just about to accelerate, he was confident in catching up. The poor rat could only struggle to put some distance between them without taking a single breath. The revolving bombs on Felix's hands denied him from doing so. F.U.C.K. This shitty maze. And his bloodline. Desperate and despairing, Lazy Rat could only blame the maze for countering his underground digging ability. As for the other peak ability, he couldn't use it even if he wanted since it required him to open his mouth to spew a rain of sharp rocks. If it wasn't for those limitations, this situation would play in a different scenario. 8 meters, 7, 5, 2 meters. Felix's grin got wider and wider as his eyes landed on the despairing look of Lazy Rat. He extended his hand and suddenly lunged at him, catching him from the hind leg. Thud. Thud. Lazy Rat tripped as he couldn't balance himself with only 3 legs. He and Felix both rolled a few times forward. Yet still, Felix's hand never let go of his leg. The moment Felix managed to balance himself, he stood up and lifted Lazy Rat by his leg. "We it!" Without using any poison inducement or bothering to hear the cries of Lazy Rat, Felix smashed his body with the metallic ground as hard as he could. Lazy Rat's despairing face was the first to make contact with the floor. Boom! The sound produced from the collision was beyond comprehension. For some, it sounded the same as a grenade going off, while for some it was more like a balloon exploding. The only thing that was agreed upon was that no one would wish the fate of Lazy Rat to their worst enemies. That was fun. True. Satisfied, Felix and Asna, the 2 psychos stared at remnants of what's left from Lazy Rat's head, splintering around the area, creating a horrifying gory scene. Blood, pieces of flesh, and brain matter dyed the smooth silver color of the floor. "Queen, please clean me up." Felix's outfit that was covered in blood and some pieces of flesh was returned to its brand new appearance. "Thanks." He nodded his head with a smile and sprinted in direction of his 2 other prey like he never killed Lazy Rat in such a fiendish fashion. In his previous life, he killed hundreds upon hundreds of players in the games he played. However, only a few were as inhuman as this one. One could only wonder if Asna's sadistic personality started to rub off on him after their souls merged. Damn, even though seeing such a brutal death felt good, I still preferred seeing a new inducement. Just from that smash alone, I turned into an avid fan for Landlord. Add me to the club. Zoe closed the chat section after seeing that the spectators' interest was still on Felix and no one was annoying her to switch the camera focus to another player. The audience was satisfied as well with having Felix on the big screen. This problem was always a pain in the ass to her and probably every MC in the SG. There were at least tens of millions of spectators in each game no matter its rank or ELO. Some were avid fans of players and some were just trying to enjoy their time. Yet, there was only one screen, displaying one player at a time. The MCS were always having difficulty trying to balance the interest of everyone without getting booed. Just like what happened before to Zoe. Some may think that it was easy to solve this problem. One just had to increase the number of screens, right? Wrong. This was already been tested before and it ended horribly. The sheer deafening noises those screens added were beyond expectation. After all, there were millions of fans live, and if just 1 million cheered for one player while 1 million booed for one player and continuously so, the never-ending noise would ruin the atmosphere of the stadium. Usually, the MCS would rather have a noisy stadium for hype. But, if it was going to be a constant symphony of random cheers, boos, yells, and weeps all happening at the same time, they would rather have a silent stadium to focus on. So the SG Rule Committee had to scrap that plan and go back to using only one screen, projecting one player for the audience to focus on, whether they like it or not. At least by then, the noise would be coherent. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _480977832483777050 for visiting. Landlord is about to reach battalion and disgraced face. How is going to deal with them? Zoe said. What's up with them? Confused, Felix propped his chin on his hand, as he observed his prey staying frozen in front of a wall. It seems they found something inside a wall. He figured so easily, as there was no other reason than this. Besides hidden compartments, only traps were within the walls as well. Well, there is only one way to find out. He leaned closer to the wall until only 2 inches were separating them. He then squinted hard, causing the red shimmering light in his eyes to brighten up. Hee, lucky bastards, to actually find a teleportation circle plus a chest. Not bad at all. At this point, Zoe and the spectators were already convinced that Felix had an X-ray vision or ability as such. They could excuse the way he dodged traps, found beasts, and even the way he met with the Alliance. But to stand still exactly in direction of battalion and disgraced behind a wall that had 10 meters width, they could not excuse it anymore. The only thing they were wondering about was how detailed his vision was. Because it seemed that Felix probably had the same omnipotent vision as them. After all, he managed to easily locate those two even after they put a quite substantial distance between each other. In their eyes, his bloodline was getting stronger and also creepier. Felix decided to ambush them while they still had their focus fixed on the hidden compartment. He knew that the best method to play this was to actually wait for them until they activate the traps in the hidden compartment. But he was worried that they would flat out die due to them. That's a hard no for him. He must deal the last finishing blow to get the points. Let's open up with a combo, 1 paralyze bomb, and 1 dizziness bomb. He loomed closer to his preys, who were in a heated argument for a couple of minutes now. The closer he was getting, the easier he was able to pick up what they were saying. It's the yellow vase. Trust me on this one. I was even close to a puzzle game before. Baby oil, it's not like I don't trust your opinion, but it is clear that the riddle is talking about the red vase. We already went through this for 100 times, we are just wasting time by now. If you listened to me, we wouldn't be still here. For f***ck's sake, let's each handle a vase and get it over with. Fine. Idiots, at least talk with your backs to each other. Felix scoffed at their wide-open backs and hurled the newly created bombs in a baseball pitcher. Whoosh! Alerted by the projectile sound, they reflexively turned around with their hands raised in front of their heads. Alas, they should have held their breaths as well. Poof poof! The bombs exploded near their faces, forcing them to inhale the light yellow and the sky blue inducements obediently. Startled and spooked, they attempted to take a step back away from the cloud mist. Yet, before their leg even landed on the floor, it froze with few twitches here and there, just like the rest of their body. Yet, what made them truly horrified was the sudden vertigo feeling that assaulted them. They couldn't think straight for even a second as their wide-eye eyes were feeding them an image of a person looming closer to them while spinning continuously. Chapter 130, The Jigsaw Puzzle. Hello, boys. With hands in his pocket, Felix approached the immobilized duo with quick footsteps. He wasn't worried about them escaping his inducement's effect. If any random could just do so, the primogenitor should just hand his poison lord position to another. Agitated at hearing that familiar damned voice, Battalion and Disgraced were on the verge of insanity. They could neither move nor think straight to activate a single ability. They were completely crippled both physically and mentally by Felix's inducement combo. If only they were able to close their eyes, the vertigo feeling would have lessened and let them activate their abilities. Unfortunately, even their eyelids were paralyzed. Next time, don't enter a partnership if you don't know how it works. That was the last advice they heard before their skulls got penetrated with Felix's index fingers at exactly 5 seconds. Felix had it all calculated in his mind. He was absolutely certain that only 2 bombs were enough for him to finish them off. If he wasn't, he would have thrown 2 more as a precaution. Thud thud. Their bodies immediately hit the ground after Felix retrieved his fingers which were supporting their weight. Their agitated expressions remained affixed in their faces even after turning into corpses. Felix cleaned his bloodied fingers with a handkerchief and pulled those 2 away from the wall. They were lying exactly in front of the hidden compartment. After dealing with the corpses, he stood a few meters away from the wall and squinted at it, trying to see the exact shapes of the things inside. He wasn't a retard like those 2, who stood merely a meter away from the compartment. But, he could excuse their behavior as they didn't have the same vision as him. If they did, they would have been scared shitless at how close they were to hell. His eyes reflected a red circle pulsing with heat waves, a medium-sized chest, and an array of deadly traps pointing at the entrance. He figured out easily that the circle was a teleportation device. As for the chest, he couldn't see its real color and rank, as it was shining with a red light. What do you think, Asna? Should we go for it or keep hunting? Well, I think you should go for it since your judge mentioned that there might be scrolls taking you to open chests. Indeed, the only issue I am worried about is the rank of the chest. I don't want to get baited. Just do it. It's fun, I mean it's important for your victory. Felix didn't bother replying to her anymore. He was stupid in the first place to even ask for her opinion. She clearly just wanted to have fun, not caring about the results of the game or wager. He knew for a fact that she might even propose to activate the teleportation circle just to fulfill her curiosity. Screw it, I can afford to take risks with my points. Focused, he narrowed his eyes at the area in front of the hidden compartment. He advanced step by step with heightened senses, not daring to underestimate the traps in front of him. He didn't know which one of those images and words ahead of him was the key to the compartment or the traps. He stopped before 2 calligraphic sentences, emitting an aura of mystery and beauty. He believed that the current key was one of them or both, as they were exactly in the middle of the compartment door. Delighted, his eyes brightened up as he noticed that they were riddles. It was time for him to work his long-lost magic. What you seek is within a peak. But peek underneath your feet, to obtain what you seek. His eyes focused on the second riddle, a broken vase, especially its base, must be displaced, to reach another space. Felix rested his chin on his hand and chuckled after reading the 2 riddles. Without burning too many brain cells, Felix knew what those riddles meant easily. After all, he was looking at the hidden compartment right behind those riddles. That facilitated the mystery of the riddles to null. If it was another one, they would take a few minutes to comprehend its meaning. After all, those 2 riddles were not the only ones on the walls, but just one of the millions of inscriptions on the walls and the floor. Their sheer amount would render anyone helpless in connecting the riddles to each other. If it wasn't for so, Battalion and Disgraced wouldn't have spent so much time staring at it. With an amused expression, he inspected under his feet, expecting to find the real key to the door. Just as he assumed, 3 broken vases into random pieces each with their own color, greeted his eyes. Yellow, red, and milky white. He crouched next to them and examined each one thoroughly. So this was the reason for their argument before. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry at their low IQ. Wasn't the true answer as clear as day? Felix didn't even take a second before he figured out that the milky white vase was the true key to the compartment. He easily concluded so from the second riddle. Felix interpreted it as such. To use the teleportation circle, one first must piece together one of the jigsaws. This was the first and also the easiest interpretation. Battalion and disgraced probably figured as much. However, the real hidden interpretation was on the last phrase. To reach another space. This clearly implied that a teleportation circle was within the wall. If Battalion and disgraced dug deeper into this phrase, they would have figured out eventually that there was a connection between one of the jigsaw vases and the teleportation circle. The color. The teleportation circle was famously known for having a milky white color, just like the only vase that had this color. Yet, those buffoons kept arguing about the other two, totally ignoring the real key. Yes, jigsaw puzzle. Let me solve it for you. Eager, Asna stood up on her bed, not caring about her exposed enchanting body. She squinted in focus at the jigsaw and memorized each piece's position. She then closed her eyes and sat back in the bed. She wanted to solve it in her mind first, before retelling it to Felix. She wasn't worried about her memory failing her. A being with high status in the universe like her enjoyed a lot of perks, and absolute memory was just one of them. Few minutes passed in utter silence, as Felix kept switching positions of pieces with his fingers. Some were big and easily noticeable, while some had the size of a coin. Plus, with the milky white color of the vase, the puzzle wasn't getting any easier. Regardless of its difficulty, Felix always had a nostalgic smile on his face as he kept trying to solve it. He heard what Asna had said, and understood that he could just chill and let her do it for him. But why would he do so? He wasn't brain-dead not to try his best to solve it solo. In this life, he might hate puzzle-type games due to their many variables affecting his victory. But it wasn't like he hated the puzzles themselves. In fact, he loved them dearly. No one could understand his relationship with puzzles and riddles. In his previous life, puzzles and external additions in games were his two favorites, as even him, a trash player with a garbage bloodline, could topple over veterans and clinch the championship if he played his cards right. That's what he feared would happen in this life now, for total trash to secure the win under his nose. It was fun when he did it. But, it was not cute anymore when the affected was him. Done. 6 minutes? It seems like I got rusty. Satisfied yet somewhat unhappy, he pieced the last one inside a tight-fit part of the vase's base. Immediately after it got attached, the vase shone with a milky white light and suddenly projected a beam of it on the two riddles, lighten them up. Felix took 5 steps back and raised his guard up, expecting traps inside the wall to propel everything into his previous spot. This was the second hurdle. If one believed that by solving the jigsaw, the door would open to riches, then he could only get turned into a porcupine by the salvo of arrows, bullets, spears. Ka-thump! Felix heightened his senses even further after seeing the traps heating up, preparing to strike behind the wide-open entrance. Praise me, Felix! Or else I won't tell you how to so.lv, it. Asna's smugness died down gradually as her eyes widened at the barrage of traps, landing on the jigsaw, yet, what shocked her was not that, but the fact that it was shining with a white L.U.S.Tur, displaying its beauty in a complete one piece. Oh, you are still on that. Good job, Asna, you did well. Nonchalant, Felix advanced forward, unworried anymore about the traps. The heat they were emitting before died down. In other words, their energy core had run out of juice. Asna didn't respond to his praise. She simply laid on her bed with a deadpan expression and covered herself with bed sheets from top to bottom. His praise kept repeating in her mind, and each time it sounded more sarcastic and jeering. She couldn't understand how Felix outed her in a puzzle. He never showed before a single interest in puzzles or riddles. In fact, the only time he spoke about them was when he found out he lucked out on this game. Her mind began to get confused and messy about this messed up situation. I can't take it anymore. I need to find out. She disconnected their connection and dove deep within his memories, trying to see what caused this abnormality. Not here, not this year, you. How can he touch himself like that? Disgusted, she bypassed those teenager days and jumped straight into his childhood years. As she stopped and submerged herself into those memories, she heard a stern voice scolding young Felix. You little shit, you will be the death of me. I told you to pee on Benjamin's shoes, not his mouth during his nap. *CK, now he ratted on me in the pub. How could I face everyone in it? But I wanted to try my best and please you. Young Felix sulked while giving Robert puppy eyes. Stop giving that angelic face. You won't escape from punishment, no matter what. Sniffle sniffle. Sigh, alright, stop crying, it was my fault in the first place. I am not punished anymore. Ha, nice try. Robert ruffled his hair and ordered, you are grounded for 15 days in your room. Go. Just as young Felix tried to cry again, Robert shooed him away. He knew his heart would turn soft if he saw it again. Tisk, it's getting harder and harder to appease Grandpa. Annoyed, young Felix wiped his fake tears and went to his room, locking himself inside, all alone. He trod towards a door that had a sign written on it, Games Room. At least I still have my babies to accompany me. Gratified, he opened the room with a smile, exposing the content to Asna. What the hell am I seeing? Asna instantly gaped at its interior, not knowing how to express her disbelief. Chapter 131, Hidden Compartment Chest. A mountain of jigsaw boxes, crossword puzzles, toys, colorful cubes and more of such games, all piled up in the corner of the room. Some were brand new, while the majority had tear marks on them. Let's see if I can break my record. She switched her vision from that mountain to Felix, who was sitting in front of two cartoonist jigsaw boxes. He put a timer next to him and unlocked the boxes at the same time. He then did the unexpected, as he emptied them all in one spot and mixed their pieces together. Let's begin. I need to finish before lunch. He let out a childlike laugh and began piecing the two puzzles, each in one space. Asna didn't stay to watch the rest, as she already saw enough to understand Felix's abnormal familiarity with puzzles. If she stayed another second, she might begin re-evaluating his stupid image in her mind to an intelligent one. She would rather die before that happened. So, she could only exit the memory and reconnect her connection with Felix. Asna. It's weird that you are not begging me to use the teleportation circle. Befuddled, Felix crouched near the circle while scratching his cheek. He expected that Asna would squeal at him for using it, but she went silent for a while now. No need. You won't listen to me anyway. True. Bastard. She gritted her teeth and stopped bickering with him. As for mentioning what happened earlier, she wouldn't mention it even if the fate of the universe was based on it. She knew that Felix was merely waiting for her to ask, so he would reply smugly about his childhood. There was nowhere in hell she would put herself in that situation. Let's hope we find something worth our time. Felix decided to focus on the chest after realizing that his chance to brag was not coming. Annoyed, he approached the chest aggressively. Don't kick it. Don't kick. Don't kick. The spectators yelled with desperation written all over their faces after seeing his hands were in his pockets as he approached the chest. Smock. 0F***CKs given by Felix, as he kicked the lid of the chest wide open. The audience instantly spat and cursed at him. Before long, boos rained on him again. His fans didn't even make a squeak this time, as they were also low-key hating what he did. Two epic chests were just ruined by his thuggish personality. What's sad was the fact those chests were the only ones found in the game currently. For both of them to end up on Felix's hands, was truly an unfortunate day for the audience. Felix sighed in relief after seeing no fireworks leaving the chest. Well, it was only natural, as he was currently inside a wall, and with the SGA taking realism dead serious, they wouldn't do so, even if they could. He waited for a moment, but it seemed that the chest wasn't going to display its content like the one before. So, he put his hand inside and brought everything outside. Oh! Not bad at all. Delighted, his eyes gleamed as he evaluated the 3 items in his hands. The first one appeared the same as a chicken leg. If it wasn't for its L.U.S.True's azure color, everyone would mistake it as such. Hee, Malin chicken fish leg, this one is going to net a good sum. How could it not? This leg was one of the few possible ways for non-marine races to be able to breathe underwater freely without side effects. Though for a limited time. Never mind, I should probably use it. His thoughts of selling it were extinguished after recalling games, which had marine-based maps. If he had it in his previous life, he wouldn't have struggled to just survive against the environment. Satisfied with the first item, he retrieved it inside his bracelet. As for the other 2 items, one was a small book and the other was an orange shimmering scroll. Interesting, exit navigation ability. He opened the book and found out after reading the first page that it was an ability, which uses an arrow to point in the right direction of the exit. His palms couldn't help but get sweaty after reading that. However, his tense muscles relaxed after finding out that it had only 2 minutes duration. No one could run from their spot to the exit in 2 minutes unless they were already quite close to it. At that point, this ability was going to be a ticket to the championship. He wiped his sweaty hands and focused on the scroll. He unsealed it with an eager expression, hoping to be surprised. The hell? Well, he was surprised all right after seeing a path drawn from his current spot to a red X at the top rightmost corner of the maze, written above it legendary chest. Yet his happiness didn't even take root before it got quenched by the long distance between him and the mark. Based on the scroll, he figured out that his position was near the bottom leftmost of the maze. This meant to reach the chest, he would need to travel the entire map from corner to corner on foot while dealing with beasts, chests, and players on the way. He knew that was impossible to do, especially now that there was a bet ongoing. Irritated yet again, he kicked the damned chest for giving him such a treasure without the ability to use it. If only he was given the first 2 items alone, his mood wouldn't be ruined like this. Felix, there is another way to solve it. Asna decided to rejoin the chat after believing that this problem should have offset his focus from the puzzle. Don't you dare propose using the circle. Felix easily figured out her purpose based on her appeasing sweet tone. Every time she required something for him, she used the same tone. Come on, just use it, what are you going to lose? You are already at the worst possible position to get the chest. He glanced at the white circle and at the scroll in his hand. He kept switching sight between the 2, not knowing if it was a worthy venture or not. Asna had a good point. He understood it clearly as well. But, if he decided to teleport, it meant that he would need to give up on the beasts he marked in this area and start hunting randomly in whichever zone he got teleported at. It's a big gamble to take. If he succeeds, he would be close to the legendary chest, making the venture worth it. But if he failed, which was actually highly likely to happen, he would end up hunting leftovers of the players in the zone he got teleported into. If he got lucky, he might find epic rank beasts that no one dared to fight against. Whatever. Helpless, he rubbed his eyelids and entered the circle under the cheers of both Asna and his fans. Both of those bastards only wanted to get entertained, uncaring about the stress of the player. However, Felix didn't do it for either of them, he only believed that regret awaits him if he missed this chance to open a legendary chest. Especially when he needed a massive amount of GP. If he failed, so be it, he could just frenzy hunt anything he meets. But if he succeeds, those hardcore players should just give up on the wager. If Epic Chest gave 1500 GP, how many more a legendary chest would give Felix? 30 seconds later, Felix's body reassembled from light particles into becoming whole again. A moment after, he opened his eyes and raised his vigilance to the peak, he began surveying the area with his infrared vision activated to its full potential. Wall after a wall was being removed from his sight, exposing a 100-meter diameter around him without a single hindrance. Immediately after, 2 red lights were laid bare in his predatory eyes. One was at the very tip of his vision, showcasing a weak shape of a quadruped beast, while the other was 70 meters away to his right, displaying a shape of a human. Not bad, a beast and a human. Satisfied, he smiled and lowered the intensity of his vision to the minimum again. The walls began to reappear until he was sandwiched between two, creating a path that led to a 90-degree two-ways cross. Felix pulled his right sleeve up and clicked on his bracelet, planning to bring out the scroll to check on his position. Hopeful, he unrolled the scroll wholly, showcasing a new drawn path between him and the chest. The path was the only thing shown on the map. As for the rest of the maze, it appeared foggy, blocking his vision from seeing the paths around his position. See. You should always listen to my advice. Felix didn't even get the chance to feel elated about the new path before Asna's proud voice ruined it for him. It's just all right. I will still need 1 hour and a half at least to reach the chest. Annoyed, he snorted and closed the scroll, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of being right. Although he didn't enter the circle due to her advice, Asna would still see it as such and take the credit since she was the first to propose it. Hee, I can taste your salt from this misty popcorn. Felix clicked his tongue and stopped bickering with her. There were more pressing issues to take care of now. Which one of those two are on the way to the treasure? He asked. He didn't want to move until he got a clear objective of what he should do. As for the chest? That was for later. Felix never planned to just run to it straight, ignoring all the praise in his path. He was not stupid to miss free guarantee GP. After all, he had no idea which beast was guarding that chest. Hell, it could be a mental-type legendary beast, and Felix understood clearly that if it was, the only option he had was to give up on it. This meant that he would have wasted 1 hour and a half running for nothing. His contenders on the bet were definitely going to surpass him. Forget about Princess Bird, Master Mania who wasn't even in the top 5 could reach him. Thus, any prey he met on the way must be killed no matter what. Chapter 132, Charm Elementalist. Asna closed her eyes, as she examined the map of the scroll in her mind. If it wasn't for this cheat, Felix wouldn't have closed the scroll so quickly. It seems like the human is the closest one to the path. The beast is way off. She answered. All right, the human it is. Felix cracked his knuckles while bending his knees forward. The spectators knew that he was going to sprint through the paths again. Something only he was doing so far. The rest of the players walked on the ground like they were stepping on eggshells, boring them to death, especially when they had an omnipotent vision. No one could understand their vexation of knowing that the path was free of traps, yet they had to watch a player, calculating each step he takes. This was one of the reasons why Felix was still the preferred main target of the camera, even though he gave no heed to their wishes. However, that was only if there was nothing interesting going on with the rest of the players. Zoe wasn't unprofessional to focus the camera on Felix who was doing nothing but sprinting while ignoring other juicy dramatic fights. Just like in this case. Who would have known that Charming Sky was the first to find an epic beast after Landlord? Zoe dragged her finger on the small screen belonging to Charming Sky and put it on the large screen. As an MC on the verge of promotion to middle ELO, Zoe's eyes were of course top-notch, not missing a thing on those 100 invisible small screens. After seeing Charming Sky on the screen, the men cheered and whistled, creating a symphony of catcalls. It was about time for beauty to grace the stage. In the very center of a wide-open cross where 5 paths met, sat a serpent-like beast while coiled around itself, displaying its bestial beauty to all. It had golden sandy scales gleaming under the sunlight, 3 white slitless eyes, and a long purple tongue, making hissing sounds each time it came out of its fangless mouth. Although the beast was coiled, Charming Sky was not fooled by its 2 meters length. She discerned that its real length was probably 6 meters or more. She was quite close, as the beast statics which was shown on the screen, clearly mentioned that its length was 7.5 meters sharp. "My little bunnies, I have a mission for you." She smiled alluringly with her eyes shimmering a pinkish color and said to the 6 men surrounding her, "I need you to slay that beast for me. It's blocking my path." Irritated, Charming Sky saw that the small pink hearts on their eyes dimmed a bit at her request. She knew that her ability was giving in to their struggles. F***scu.mbags, why do you force me to waste more energy? Although her thoughts were toxic, her entire visage was a completely different story. She folded her arms under her chest, lifting her brie.s.ts slightly upward, exposing a deep creamy white cleavage. She then bent her head slightly with a cute pout on her glossy lips. This alluring combination of cuteness and easiness caused the small pink hearts on those men's eyes to brighten up again, as they ogled her chest with a l.u.s.t full expression. No one but her was able to see pink particles getting absorbed from her body into those men's eyes. "Bastards, you better kill it. I lost 40% energy all at once." Her pink shimmering eyes dimmed a bit in the process. It was like the small pink hearts were batteries, and she must constantly recharge them with energy if she wanted her requests to be fulfilled. As expected from Feathertail Fox bloodline, Zoe brought the mic closer to her lips and explained it to those who never heard of it. This is one of the few remaining Tier 2 charm elemental beasts. Plus it is an epic rank. Sadly, the only known method to obtain it is to join the 6-tailed Dream Fox clan. She covered her mouth and giggled, "Sorry boys, they only accept females." Charming Sky had her hands resting on her h.i.p.s as she kept watching her 6 admirers approach the serpent. Their tensed shoulders and sweaty foreheads were an obvious sign of being terrified by the golden serpent. Charming Sky neither joined them nor ordered them on how to fight. She simply kept her distance, preparing to bolt the moment shit hit the fan. She understood clearly that her active ability unrefusable request didn't allow her to control men like puppets, but merely turn them into her admirers, who would fulfill her requests. As for how they planned to do so, she had absolutely no clue. The ability itself just installed a notion in their minds that Charming Sky's requests were the same as heaven decrees, irrefutable, and unquestionable. However, such a busted ability of course came with a massive price. That was the energy needed to fulfill a request was a proponent to its danger. If she asked for their death, the price would sap all of her energy, leaving her drained. Even then, the energy wouldn't be enough to force just one into committing suicide. "That's it, surrounded it like that, good job." Her eyes shone with delight at their smart strategy. She wanted to clap her hands to cheer them on, but she was afraid about attracting the serpent's attention. Based on its slitless white eyes, she easily figured out that it was blind, and those blind beasts were the hardest to deal with, as their other senses were enhanced over the top. Not a single whisper, smell, and even an air vibration could bypass them. Good, they were not total morons to rush it from one side as I assumed. I might have a chance to kill it. Thrilled at that thought, she clenched her hands tightly. She had no idea if Felix was still rank 1 or not, but she was certain that by killing this beast, her rank would jump straight to rank 1. SSSSSSS. However, before she went too deep in her imagination, an ear-piercing sound brought her to reality. She crouched down and pressed her palms tightly on her ears, trying her best to alleviate the ringing noise that was playing on her brain over and over again. What the hell is this? Is it an ability or normal hissing sound? Frightened, she stood up and distanced herself even further, totally abandoning her minions behind. She truly made a grave mistake by sticking next to battle with her trashy defenses. After seeing that she was quite far enough, she stopped and leaned next to the wall's corner, peeking at the unfolding battle with one eye. Zoe and the spectators didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this sight. How could she be this scaredy cat? The serpent merely hissed as a warning for overstepping its territory. It wasn't even an attacking attempt. The 6 players surrounding the serpent with unbothered expressions was the perfect proof. Cough, Charming Sky made the right decision. Zoe tried her best to keep a serious expression as she defended her. As a mental-type fighter, one should always keep a safe distance from the battle. Although, not as much as hers. But who are we to judge? The spectators guffaw at her claim for a bit before quietening down at the sight of the serpent uncoiling itself, standing on its tail proudly and towering over the 6 men, akin to rats in its presence. Calamity Windstorm, Blizzard Vortex, Claws of the Fury, Bronze Wall, Barrier of Renewal, Hellfire Salvo. They didn't wait for it to make a move, as each one of them activated their abilities, wanting to strike first. Those with morphing abilities rushed forward, unbothered by the massive pressure the serpent kept emitting. As melee fighters, they were already used to this kind of pressure. Meanwhile, the elemental rangers used all of their attacks at once, creating a messy battlefield, filled with windstorms, icy vortex, and flames raging all around the serpent. The melee fighters were not worried about getting affected by their allies' abilities, as they had defensive barriers on them created by supportive type players. This kind of basic synergy between them was only working because they were using a foundation formation everyone had an idea of. Melee fighters at the forefront, offensive rangers at the middle, and supportive players at the back end. This division of labor allowed even random players like them to fight as a team without stepping on each other's toes. Thrilled and entertained, the audience cheered at this spectacular sight with their hands waving in the air. Individual games might be fun, but it would never surpass the popularity of planetary-type games, just because of those abilities' combination and teamwork, especially when humans had a limited number of abilities in their arsenal. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _481496592223402333 for visiting. Only in planetary games were bloodline abilities truly shown, as synergy between teammates was well endorsed. SSSSSS. The serpent raised its head and hissed in agony and fury as it being was assaulted by a rain of never-ending projectiles. The rangers didn't plan to stop their attacks until the serpent either dropped dead or they dropped drained. Excited, Charming Sky thumped her fist in the air, as she cheered them on. SSSSSSSSSSS. However, after hearing that ear-piercing sound again, she closed her eyes and obediently retrieved her fists. Then she covered her ears with an aggrieved expression. Bastard, you only know how to bully me. I dare you to fight my minions. Suddenly, her tongue was tied as she saw a horrifying sight of an infinite amount of golden sand, oozing from the cracks of the serpent's scales. It didn't even take 30 seconds before the area got turned into a deep-knee desert. Yet, the serpent didn't stop releasing sand but actually increased its speed, trying to bury everyone alive. Glacial land, heat furnace, skin of bronze, floating sphere. The players used whatever in their pocket to get them out of this raging tsunami of sand. Even though the easiest method was to simply retreat to the paths behind them, they couldn't do so. The request forbade them from having any thoughts of escape. Thus, they could only try and defend themselves from the sand, using any means possible. One of them floated in a see-through sphere while another hardened his skin as bronze. Each to their own. The blind terror serpent is finally making its move. Stirred, Zoe slammed her palm on the commentary table, as she watched the serpent dive deep within the self-created desert, hiding out of sight. She knew that an upcoming massacre was about to occur. The first attack of the serpent was merely the beginning of those players' nightmare. It was time for the predator to make everyone realize why epic beasts should not be messed with by any average Joe. Chapter 133, Raging Sandstorm. Scared shitless, the players stood above the sand with heartbeats racing and tense limbs. Their eyes kept shifting from a sand dune to another, trying to catch a glimpse at the predator underneath them. Unfortunately, only rolling waves of sand covered their vision. There was absolutely no sign of the serpent's whereabouts. This feeling of knowing that they were being watched without the ability to discern from where caused their already tense limbs to stiffen even further. They would rather have the beast towering over them as before than hide underneath their feet like this. Seconds went by and the only thing that was still making its presence heard, was the sound of the desert getting larger and spreading wider. The serpent was acting the same as a chef, preparing the ingredients meticulously before cooking them off. However, its way of doing things was putting a dent in those players' mentality. Their gut feeling screamed at them to leave this death trap. Yet, their bodies were as unresponsive as a log. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _481901806113758556 for visiting. Zoe and the spectators all went quiet as well. No one made a single sound, as their eyes were fixated on the serpent that was swimming within the sand, unhindered like a fish in the ocean. Few whispers were thrown here and there about who was the lucky player to get picked up first. Suddenly, their eyes brightened up, as they noticed the serpent slithering towards a player that had a frozen area of sand around him. The player was putting his entire focus on freezing the sand underneath him, so the serpent wouldn't pop out straight under his feet. Too bad, his proactive defensive attempt made the serpent put its focus on him first. It sensed that it shouldn't let him continue building his defenses around him. Otherwise, it would affect its final attack. Thus, the poor lad just shot himself in the foot, as the serpent used its long golden tail like a whip, sending it towards his feet. Boom, crack! The frozen sand broke into small pieces, as the tail kept penetrating it without a single ounce of resistance. Frightened, the player tried to jump in the air after sensing that his defenses were getting ruptured within moments. However, before he reached even 1 meter mid-air, the tail latched into his waist and dragged him down, burying him out of sight in an instant. It happened so fast, the others in the area didn't even catch a glimpse at the serpent. The only thing their eyes kept feeding them was a 2-meter hole left behind after that deadly and hidden ambush. The open cross was engulfed in an ever creepier silence. Gulping sounds were heard here and there, as the players were on the verge of a mental breakdown. Their mind and instinct kept clashing for control over their bodies. Their instinct kept sending signals to retreat as fast as possible. Meanwhile, their minds refused to disobey Charming's request. This constant war was taking a toll on their bodies, leaving them unfocused and weakened. They already had a null chance of slaying the serpent with their basic synergy, but now, it was simply a fat joke. They were just sitting ducklings in the eyes of the spectators, waiting for their turn to get dragged deep within the sand. Worried, Charming Sky kept biting her nails while observing this trashy display of skills. In her eyes, there were plenty of ways they could rely on to counterattack the serpent ambushing techniques. The easiest and fastest way was of course to use a bait to drag the serpent out and bombard it with a barrage of elemental abilities. They could simply make their frontliner taunt the beast underneath while having every defensive ability on him or ready to activate. The serpent with its top-notch hearing would not miss his voice, and after constant provocative attempts, the serpent was definitely not going to spare him. If that happened, the rangers with all of their strongest offensive abilities would have an easy time barraging it after it exposes itself. This was merely one of the many ways this battle could have played out. But those strategies only worked for well-trained teams. As for those randoms who weren't even able to control their own decisions properly, forget about having synergy with each other, they didn't even have a proper synergy between their bodies and instinct. This was one of the many weaknesses of Charming Sky's bloodline. The player's gut feeling always gets in the way of her request, thus lowering their strength by at least 60%. This issue only crops up during those kinds of difficult battles. Charming Sky knew so as well but didn't want to admit it. She would rather blame the stupidity of her minions than to accept that her bloodline was flawed. Unfortunately for her, the terror serpent wasn't in the mood to entertain her ego, as its preparation for her final attack was finally over. The desert that was enlarging within eyesight abruptly stopped, leaving the players worried about this unknown action and the spectators holding their breath in anticipation. "It is coming." Thrilled, Zoe pointed with a slender finger at the serpent, which buried deep down start to coil around itself until it was squeezed into merely 1.5 meters. The cracks on its scales opened up yet again, but this time instead of releasing sand, it withdrew it. Whoosh! Whoosh! If before, the sand oozing speed was fast, then its withdrawal was at least 10 times that. Yet, the scary part wasn't even this, but the fact that the sand was whirling in the process, creating a horrifying sandstorm. The players' defenses meant jack shit in front of this raging storm that was traveling 750 kilometers per hour. Their bodies were all flung in the air and revolved around the center of the serpent's position. The weaker ones defensive-wise, had their bodies' limbs all ripped apart in a cruel fashion, spraying blood and pieces of flesh in the air just to be obliterated by the storm. As for the rest of the players, their skin was being peeled slowly by the sand particles, which were battering them in a consistent manner. Ah! The moment one of them opened his mouth, trying to scream over this torturous way of dying, sand assaulted the inside of his body through his mouth. If only swallowing sand was the end, it wouldn't have mattered that much. Sadly, it wasn't even close, as the sand inside his stomach kept trying to withdraw to the serpent's scales as well. This resulted in having a mini-storm inside the body too, destroying every organ in sight. Oh! Mortified, the audience's heads all drew back while hissing at the sight of that player's guts, exploding akin to eating a hand grenade. He died instantly. But he shouldn't feel too sad, as the rest accompanied him within a few seconds in between, leaving the sandstorm raging all by itself. On the other hand, Charming Sky was already 1 km away from them and was still running barefoot while holding her high heels under her armpit. She stood true to her word and escaped the moment shit hit the fan. After seeing the desert stopped enlarging, her gut feeling told her that it was time to bolt. And bolt she did without questions asked. She didn't care in the slightest about stepping on traps, as the only thought in her mind was to be as far as possible from that damned serpent. She truly overestimated her strength and her bloodline in thinking that it was enough to handle an epic tier 2 beast. Who can win against this monster? Screw you, landlord, you baited me. Riled up and displeased, she gritted her teeth while checking from time to time behind her back. Her displeasure was understandable, as she believed that since Felix could beat an epic beast solo, wasn't even easier for her team to do the same? After all, she had 6 bloodliners under her thumb and all of them weren't too shabby. Unfortunately, that thought was utterly extinguished from her mind after her team got played by the serpent without even wounding it that heavily. Right now, she wanted nothing but to beat up Felix for baiting her into that death trap. She already placed all the blame on poor Felix, who had no idea about any of this. Charming Sky's personality was still as irresponsible and egoist as ever. She would rather blame innocence than take the blame on herself. That's too unfortunate for Charming Sky. Zoe shook her head and highlighted Charming's statics on the screen. She pointed at the energy index and explained, she consumed too much energy during that fight. Her energy now is not even 30%. If she won the battle, that would still be all right. She sighed, but now, she is definitely eliminated from the wager. There is nothing much she could do. Although the spectators were disappointed at her early disqualification from the bet, they still cheered for her since she gave them a terrific fight to watch. Though it was more like a one-sided slaughter, it was still pretty entertaining to watch. Chapter 134, Meeting Up with the Devil Himself. After a while, Charming Sky could be seen having a really tough time in the maze while acting frugal with her remaining energy. She kept her guard heightened to the peak, not daring to underestimate anything. Heck, even one bullet could straight out kill her. She had not a single defensive passive or active ability. The only thing that set her body apart from commoners was the physical enhancement after she reached the first stage of replacement. Nonetheless, that buff meant jack shit in front of those traps and other players' attacks. Before, she was acting C.O.C.Ky because she had her minions with her, protecting her on the journey, but now, she could only rely on herself. I will use alluring perfume for a bit. I don't feel safe at all. I need meat shields. Desperate and quite terrified of the creepy silence around her, she leaned against a wall and activated the ability, which allowed her to gather that many men around her this early in the game. Whoosh! An invisible pinkish smoke began to exude from her body's pores like she was releasing her natural fragrance. This smoke, unlike Felix's aura, didn't stop within few meters but kept spreading wider and wider until none of it was near her. The bait was laid bare, the only thing left was for men to smell it, and see if their mental defenses were enough to protect them from its enchantment. If not, their fates were known already. After a while of waiting, Charming began to lose hope. She understood that her ability was not foolproof, as it couldn't continue spreading to infinity. Rather, it had a limited range as well, just a quite wide one. Based on her cheapskate use of energy, this range shrunk even further, thus she knew that her attempt was merely a shot in the dark. Pitter, patter. Suddenly, a clear set of footsteps echoed in Charming Sky's ears, akin to heavenly bells ringing to welcome her into its gate. She never thought in her life that the sound of walking would appear pleasing and lovable until this moment. Please be a frontliner player. Excited and somewhat hopeful, she rushed to the corner of the wall and peeked at her prey with one eye. Hello there. Too bad, a simple easygoing greeting sent her into the depth of despair. She knew that men controlled by her ability were not supposed to speak. This meant the player in front of her withstood her ability. Yet, what pushed her even deeper within the abyss, was the fact that the damned voice belonged to the player. She blamed her misfortune on him. Landlord. Her heart almost leaped out of her throat, as she saw him raising his hand. She thought he would launch a surprise attack on her since they were quite close to each other. But he just waved his hand as a greeting. What's up with you? Felix approached her casually and said, I thought you would have a bunch of men around you. Charming Sky wasn't fooled by his nonchalant attitude. She sensed that her life would immediately be snuffed out if he reached her side. So, she stepped back while having the most beautiful smile she could muster. Stop jesting, Mr. Lord. I am not that kind of woman. She giggled with one hand covering her mouth, and the other low-key removing her high heels. She had to wear a provocative outfit in order for her abilities to take effect much faster without wasting too much of her energy. But now, she started to regret not just wearing sneakers or boots like the rest. Felix didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this sight. He could only speechlessly watch her loosen up her heels strings, clearly planning to bolt from his sight. It seems like something happened to her to be this fearful. He smirked and created one milky white bomb in his pocket. Might as well enjoy this freebie. Felix never had the thought of sparing her. He was a true gentleman, who respected women's rights of equality. Thus, she deserved to be treated the same way he treated men. Mr. Lord, how about we create a partnership? Charming Sky extended her hand forward, seeking a handshake, and said with a smile, with my mental abilities and your legendary bloodline, our combination would dominate this game. She quickly added after seeing that he wasn't responding, I don't care about the bet anymore. You can obtain all the GP we find. Unfortunately for her, Felix didn't forget the rules of the wager just because she was a beauty with a bit of her skin exposed. Creating alliances to hunt down beasts was forbidden. Felix had no plans to switch to hunting players to appease her. No thank you. Indifferent, he dropped all facade and threw his bomb as suddenly as his response. Poof! Charming Sky pinched her nose and closed her mouth shut, not daring to breathe in the inducement. However, before she could even exit the white mist that was blocking her vision, a hand suddenly clutched her neck tightly and lifted her in the air like she weighed absolutely nothing. This was the fate of every mental-type player. A total submission under the hands of melee-type players. Just as Felix wanted to snap her neck, he saw her mouth a word soundlessly as she was being chalked. A bit interested in what she said, he hurled her towards the wall, smashing her body against it. Thud, arg. A pained groan escaped from her lips, as she leaned against the wall with a drop of blood streaking down her chin, coming from her mouth. Felix crouched next to her with one acid bomb hovering near her face and asked, "What do you mean by epic?" That was the word she mouthed earlier. Felix decided to give her a shot and speak her piece since he had nothing to lose but a couple of seconds. However, if she lied to him to buy some time for her eventful death, he didn't mind ruining her pretty face with that acid bomb before killing her. Frightened out of her wits by his thuggishness, Charming Sky didn't even wipe the blood from her mouth as she began explaining with a bit of difficulty, "You were right, cough. I had 6 men with me before. But they all died after they failed to slay an epic serpent." She increased her pace after seeing the bomb etching closer to her face. "Please let me go. I can lead you to it." Sob, sob. Finally not being able to handle the pressure, her tears started flooding down while sobbing out loud like she was being mistreated. Slap. Just as she wanted to wail to enhance her pitfall appearance, a sudden slap silenced her immediately. "My patience is thin. You better be quiet and lead the way if you don't want your face to melt." Felix knew that she was just trying to gain his sympathy by her appearing as such. But he didn't have time to waste on appeasing her gently. A slap was enough as a shortcut. "Show me the direction." Felix caught her hand and lifted her up. "Ouch!" She yelped at his rough way of doing it. But she could only hide her grievance in her heart and point at the path on their left. Felix nodded his head and ordered sternly, "If you don't want to die by the traps or my bomb, stick close to me." Without giving her a second to comprehend what he meant, Felix pointed his finger at her face, and the acid bomb started hovering slightly near it. Felix was using his energy to control it, just like the way Noah used his energy to carry that behemoth ice mace before. The moment an ability was released from the body, the bloodliner could control it by his energy. Not manipulate the ability itself, but only how it moved. Felix always had a connection with his bombs before they exploded. If it wasn't for so, how was he supposed to blow them up manually? Spooked, Charming Sky gulped a mouthful as she stared at this deadly threatening attempt. She understood clearly that the moment Felix turned his head and didn't see her behind him, he wouldn't hesitate to pop it off. But what did he mean by getting killed by traps? "If we walk slowly we don't have to worry about th." Before her mind could even process what he meant, she saw him sprint on the path, leaving her behind. Speechless and quite scared at the bomb exploding abruptly, she chased after him with one hand waving frantically, "Wait for me." Chapter 135, F***ck him up for me blindy. Turn left. No wait, I think it's right. Charming Sky immediately apologized with her hands folded after seeing Landlord's fists clutched tight. She knew that he was livid at her direction mistakes she kept repeating over and over again. This was already the 5th one. Felix didn't mind the first time, but after it happened twice, thrice and it kept going on and on, he began to feel cheated honestly. After all, he activated his heat vision to its full potential more than twice now, but still, not a single sign of the serpent she spoke about was in his vision. He couldn't help but doubt her a bit and think that all of this was just a farce to prolong her life. "Oh yes. We are near." Charming pointed her finger at an image on a wall and explained with relieved expression, "I remember that picture clearly, as I leaned on it to wear my high heels before." She moved past him and said with a confident smile, "Please follow me, the beast is only a few hundred meters ahead of us." Felix unclutched his fists and decided to trust her words one last time. If it turned that she lied to him again, he wouldn't hesitate to explode that acid bomb on her face. "Lead the way," he ordered with a frigid tone. Charming wasn't bothered by it, as this time she was certain about her direction. Without further ado, she walked with haste, unworried about stepping on the traps. She was certain that Landlord had an X-ray vision, as each time they were in front of a trap, he warned her before they bypassed it. Now, although she was leading the way, she was confident that Landlord wouldn't let her die by them. Otherwise, who would show him the path? If only she knew that Felix's ability allowed him to see everything within 100 meters diameter for a couple of seconds, she wouldn't be that C.O.C.Ky on her worth. He could simply ditch her and find the beast by himself, but Felix didn't want to go that far unless she F.U.C.K.IED it up. His mental energy and time would be consumed if he decided to go solo from henceforth. So, it was better to let her lead him on. May I ask you something? Charming Sky gathered her courage and laid out the confusion that was eating her up, since the moment she met him. Why weren't you affected by my perfume ability? She tilted her head and added, as a poison element user, I doubt you have any mental defensive abilities, right? Oh? You mean that disgusting scent I followed? Hell, I thought it was coming from a beast. He looked at her strangely and said, I have no idea where did you get that confidence to call that smell a perfume. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number asterisk CK him up for me blindy, _482612634106528887 for visiting. Screw you. I asked you why you weren't affected by it, not to humiliate my ability. Charming Sky snapped at him, uncaring any more about his threatening acid bomb. For a woman like her who relied on beauty and charm in her daily life, to get her ability that was more like a body fragrance degraded like this was intolerable. Hey, I was just being honest. Felix chuckled at her tantrum and answered her previous question, as for how I bypassed your ability control, it was simple actually. He asked her first, does your ability need to be absorbed by the body to affect the host? Confused at where he was getting at, she nodded her head in agreement. It must be smelled to be specific. That's why it is called perfume. That's your answer. He shrugged his shoulders and didn't add anything extra to it. It wasn't his problem if she understood what he meant or not, he already entertained her inquiry for quite enough. After seeing that he wasn't planning to explain himself, she didn't bother to continue her questioning. However, her mind was at full capacity trying to figure out his meaning. For a shrewd fox like her, who relied on intelligence and beauty to battle, she easily figured out his meaning by connecting the dots together. First, she recalled that Felix had an advanced or even peak resistance to poison based on what she had seen in the first game. This meant that her perfume ability was resisted by his body after it got labeled as poison even though it was a mind-affecting ability. After all, her ability needed to be smelled in order to take effect. In other words, absorption was a must. Displeased, she frowned her eyebrows at this conclusion. She knew that her bloodline was full of limitations since it was a low-tiered for such a good element. The beast she merged with might appear strong and unique in the eyes of commoners, but only she knew that wasn't even true. The high-tiered bloodlines she saw in her clan had mental abilities stronger than hers by far. Lucky bastard, if I had epic rank tier 3 bloodline, my controlling abilities would straight out target your brain without this absorption bullshit. Irritated, she increased her speed, wanting to get rid of his smug face as fast as possible. In her mind, that was how she pictured his face. Indifferent, Felix chased after her, disinterested in finding out the reason for her weird behavior. After a couple of minutes, the same massive intersection, which was connected to multiple paths, appeared in their point of view. Oh! Surprised by the looks of the serpent, Felix raised an eyebrow. It turned out, he fought this beast before in his previous life. Though, he was more like a spectator while his clanmates were the ones fighting it. Am I allowed to leave now? Charming Sky asked with a hushed tone while hiding behind a wall a couple of meters away from him. The serpent truly scared her shitless to act like this even though they were quite distant away from it. Felix didn't even turn his head and glance at this scaredy cat. He just waved his hand dismissively, shooing her away. However, she didn't move an inch. Cough, can you remove the bomb please? Oh, I forgot, my bad. Felix chuckled at her displeased expression and snapped his finger. His sudden action made her heart skip a beat. She reflexively closed her eyes with her hands raised in front of her face, expecting the bomb to explode. Yet, the only sound she heard was Felix's footsteps as he approached the serpent with his hands in his pockets. She opened her eyes to this sight and stood stunned in her place. She thought before, that he would ask her about how the battle went, and decide whether to fight the serpent or not after hearing her minions' tragic fates. But, it turned out he wasn't even interested in gaining an understanding of the serpent. C.O.C.Ky moron, she sneered, just because you have a legendary bloodline, you thought this battle will be easy. She sat down with her back glued to the wall and gloated, I can't wait to see your arrogance shatter to pieces. Her plan to bolt after he released her was totally ignored, as she raised her fist in the air while cheering out loud, F***ck him up for me blindy. Her fear of the serpent was instantly replaced by kinship to the point she even gave him a pet name. She truly wanted Felix to die as horrible as her minions did. Just as Felix tried turning his head to glance at that troublemaker, an ear-piercing alert resounded throughout the entire maze. Peeb! Peeb! Without a second wasted, Felix retreated away from the serpent. He knew that his body would freeze immediately after the alert finishes. He was not a fool to stay in close proximity to the serpent when that happens. After all, Zoe explained before that beasts were completely free to move during the shuffle duration. Before long, Felix stood in the middle of the path away from the walls. He didn't know if the walls were going to shuffle by moving around, or they would all disappear and reposition randomly. Regardless, the safest place to stand was away from them. If it wasn't for the serpent sitting on the open intersection, he would have chosen that spot. Charming Sky rushed to his side and stood next to him. Her thought process was completely different than Felix's. She believed that others would be able to spot them after the walls reshuffled. This meant bad news for her if they saw her all alone. So, it was in her best interest to stick next to Felix and give them a false sense of partnership. Even though she didn't want to admit it, she understood that his name was enough to deter 80% of the players.